We're going to New York. One of my faves, Rob Anderson, you're up. I see him, but I don't hear him. Robert.
Hey, my connection is in and out. Can you hear me okay or no?
Yeah, we got you.
Beautiful, Mita. Thank you so much. And I'm echoing what everyone else is saying as far as the value. Quickly before I get cut off, I have.
Oh. Robert, if you wanted to drop it in the chat, you could. Now I see you.
Can you hear me? It's all right.
Yeah, now we can hear you.
All right, beautiful. Would you mind me talking about DEI fatigue and the importance of leadership, CEOs, founders? When they make the commitment, the reality is there isn't a timeline. We can't place an arbitrary number on when the culture will shift. And how do we overcome fatigue? And how do we have conversations about the shifting that's taking place with good?
I think I got most of the question. I don't want to cut you off though. Yeah. Thank you. No, that was Randy. Okay, I'm gonna take a stab at it. I have DE&I fatigue. I'm just like in a state of perpetual burnout. I'm also coming out from like 2 years of parenting in a pandemic and I'm still exhausted. And so it's real. And I think why it occurs is that leaders don't treat this as a discipline. It's like buried 5 levels under HR. There's no budget, there's no team. I mean, that's honestly why I left a very large job at a very large public company to come to a late stage startup where I was like, all this stuff was in agreement. You're not going to pay me what I made out of graduate school. You're not going to say that I'm the only person there doing this work. We're going to have a team. We're going to have a budget. But we need people internally to be fighting that, right? And like I am a catalyst for change, but it is not my job. I don't come in with a wand and fix whatever you want me to fix. And it has to be built into, I think it starts with like making sure it's funded, making sure your chief diversity officer is treated as an executive and has access and opportunity to do the work. And that it's built into the KPIs, right? You know, with the leaders that you work with. It's not, I only have the ability to hire 3 people, I have a team of 3. You don't have the ability to hire 2,000 people. So the question is, are we holding all of our leaders accountable to those goals? I think that's what's really important. And it's interesting to see, right? After the diversity tipping point, LinkedIn had a study, the chief diversity officer role, head of D&I, whatever you want to call it, grew like 300, 400%. And now I think with the recession coming, it's going to be interesting to watch to see what roles are now going to be cut. And you're just going to be left behind, right? You know, one of the conversations we're having at Carter right now, and not to get into in the last 10 minutes, a political conversation, but Roe v. Wade being overturned in the US, right? And that is really difficult conversation because 60% of the country is unhappy and the other 40% is content. And so how do you have those conversations at work? Like, are your leaders equipped to have them? Are your leaders equipped to check in on people? Are you going to, as Carta said, my note to the company was like, hey, we are all about providing equal access for quality healthcare. And so we have about 240 employees that would be impacted. And so we will cover the costs of travel for now, and we'll see what the procedures would cost. But it's not going to get any easier. I was talking to my CEO, I was like, it's Roe v. Wade today. And so many things since Roe v. Wade, from a US perspective, we had the shooting July 4th. We had Jayland, who was killed in Akron, Ohio. So you need people skilled to have these conversations. You need to have somebody who can upskill your team.
Great answer. Robert, I think that answered your question. Are you, anything else?
It was, yeah, no, it absolutely answered my question. And I would love to hear your perspective as well on the measurement. And, we set measurements for bonuses and for long-term and long-term growth. How do we have conversations with leaderships? What's the most effective way of having conversations with leadership when we're certainly building it into our KPIs, but there isn't necessarily the cultural shift that maybe someone can feel at every waking moment within an organization, and continuing to have the deep work be done, even though we can't necessarily feel it, but we know that the shift is actually happening?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I talked about those 4 pillars that I lead by earlier, in each of those pillars, you can be having KPIs in each one of them. But what I like to do is when I sit down with a leader, like if I was working for Scott, I would say, tell me, Scott, what do you want your legacy to be? Right? Most people are at this point in their career. You're like the CEO of Walmart, the CEO of, what do you want your legacy to be? You're at the pinnacle. So what are the things you want to do? Scott, let's look at your leadership team and the composition. Where do you wish it was? Where would you like it to be from 2 to 3 years time? Because that's when we work with HR and succession planning, right? It's really hard when you have that CRO job open and you're like, I need to find a CRO. Let me call my cousin's brother's roommate's friend from college, right? And do the personal referral thing, where if you constantly are just meeting great people, it's not going to be hard, right? It's when people are under pressure. And if you actually plan to say, and I did that at my time at Unilever, and we really changed the landscape of that leadership team, but it took time and it took planning, and it took for me to say to the leader, most people really start thinking about their legacy when they're in that senior role. And I really feel like that's a great opening question, because then you can lead with that to ask them, okay, this is your legacy. It's not mine. It's our legacy. What do you want to do to change?